All right, it's in the 30s today. It was in the 80s like 2 days ago. We lost like 54 degrees in the last 2 days. So it's really cold. I'm going to try to make this quicker. There's a hair sticking out. Also, I was going to recommend a new album that I just heard, but I can't remember what it is. Anyways, yeah. All right, on to this video. Hello, everybody. Thanks for watching. My name is Shaggy, the opinionated hippie, currently ranking and reviewing all the Frank Zappa tours he played in his lifetime, starting at number 26, heading towards number 1, and we are now at number 2. This is not a tour. This is half of a decade. It's the 60s. Why did I decide to group the 60s as one tour? One, because of available tapes. Really, I think the only tour I really could have done an absolutely thorough job with would be that last tour, or maybe the last two tours, sort of the last end of 68 into 69, the one that had Lowell George and Buzz Gardner. And then after that, once Lowell George left, there was a number of shows from sort of the last Real Mothers tour. And then early 68, you got a whole handful of shows before Buzz Gardner and Lowell George had showed up. 66 and 67, you're just kind of hit and miss. You have just random shows. I have shows that are labeled 67 that are definitely 69. I know in the decade since I have been like collecting tapes, things have been sorted out much better than they were like in the 90s. But I had tapes that were like literally the exact same show, and it was like labeled 3 or 4 different dates. So I think all that's been cleared up. But that was one of the reasons I decided to group the 60s together as one, is just because I felt I was more confident. And like, even if I was talking about something that took place in 68, but my tape says 69, I would still be right. I'm not going to cover. There's no way I can cover everything this era is. You would need like a 2-hour documentary, and even then you would leave stuff out. So those of you who like to comment with the stuff I miss, you're going to be able to comment for a long time on this, because there's going to be a lot of stuff I'm not going to be able to bring up. So that was one of the reasons why I grouped it together. It's just sort of the availability of what's out there. Though I think I could have easily done a Lowell George era tour, and that would still be at number 2. In fact, all of these would probably still be like, if I had broken them up into 4 tours, it would be 2, 3, 4, 5. You know, I think this era, like all my favorite albums come from this era. Just everything about this. I always refer to this as the chaos era, though it's not necessarily always sounding like chaos. But I feel like when I was collecting shows from this era, I'd get like a 68 show that was just like a pretty straightforward set list show. Awesome, great stuff. But you'd get your King Kong, Pound for a Brown, Sleeping in the Jar, maybe a Little House, just a Help I'm a Rock, Transylvania. And then I'd get another show a couple weeks later that had like a Stravinsky number and like a Charles Ives with a whole bunch of chaos, and then Frank conducting the audience, and then just random jams that go on way longer than expected. And then the next show would be like have a bunch of doo-wop numbers and then some chaos. And it just seems like there was no predictability to these sets. And over time, as we've gotten more shows released and more set lists have been available, you start to see like what Frank is working with. But even then, it's by far, I think, the most chaotic period of his time as far as like what to expect at any given show or what to hear in a set list. So that. Also, another reason I group them all together is, one, you do have the same. There are 3 people who are in every incarnation of this band. Frank Zappa, the bass player, the original bass player from the Mothers, and then Jimmy Carl Black on drums. But starting in 67, and they played a bunch of shows together with Ray Collins on vocals. Elliot Ingber was on guitar. Early, I think he did some live shows. But eventually, when they started to tour as a bigger Mothers band, Don Preston joined on keyboards. Ian Underwood joined on keyboards and woodwinds. Bunk Gardner showed up on woodwinds. Motorhead on sax. And Billy Mundy on drums. Billy Mundy would eventually leave. Art Tripp would join on drums and percussion. Ray Collins would eventually leave. He would come back for some shows in 69. But that band would pretty much stay together all the way through 69 with the addition of Lowell George and Buzz Gardner in November of 68 all the way through the middle of 69. So you really do have the core group of musicians for like the end of 67, all of 68, all of 69, with people kind of coming and going. So I did feel like it could serve as a single tour, even though it was like a Europe tour, a States tour, a residency here, a whole bunch of different stuff throughout this like 66 through 69, this like 4-year period. The other thing is I really do think there's sort of a continuum that tracking like the shows and the set list and the quality of the playing from like 67 in particular, just because we have more shows, all the way through 69, in which you see the development of sort of the standard Mother's canon, the King Kong, the Pound for a Brown, the Help I'm a Rock, Little House, Holiday in Berlin, or the Return, the Duke coming in there, you know, the more Frank songs, and then him throwing in so much other stuff, you know, Stravinsky covers, doo-wop covers, these other sort of like the stuff that would appear on like Weasel's Rip My Flesh, those like the hand signal cues where the bands would go off and stuff. You know, Frank's conducting the band to do the noises or to do different jams or to do different rhythmic patterns. All that stuff kind of developed over the years. And so to listen to all of this stuff from the 60s, like from start to finish, you see how Frank and his sort of conducting the band grew, how the band matured, how the places they went. At any given moment, it just seemed like they could do anything. And they would have these jams that were just straight up noise, and then they would all of a sudden just drop into like this, you know, like little cocktail lounge or a little like just jazz, you know, the bass player doing like a walking bass line, or just like would just go so many different places like at the drop of a hat, because that's how tight this band was and how that was how Frank was creating his music back then. Was he as a conductor was such a valuable part of like what came out of this group. But this group's ability to do what Frank wanted them to do when he conducted them was pretty friggin' amazing. And so another reason I group all these together, also in discussing this tour, I have made it a point to sort of highlight Frank's guitar playing, I think, on every single other tour I have discussed. But this is an era that I don't think Frank's guitar playing necessarily rises above the other really good stuff from this era. He definitely gets better as a guitar player over time, and he definitely is very much in his 60s mode here. I mean, the stuff that we have released is pretty indicative of like, I think what he sounds like for most of these, but there are some solos where he just goes on and on and on, and like the jams are epic, but also the horn solos are epic, and the improvisations are epic, and Frank conducting the band is epic, and like there are so many just the song. I mean, there's so many things other than Frank's guitar playing to come to this tour that even if you don't like his guitar playing, this is still a ridiculously great era of Frank. To call it a tour is wrong. I understand that. But it's the 60s. It's my second favorite. All my favorite albums come from here. It's like I'll listen to, like, when I am in the mood to listen to shows, you know, I'll dip into 74, then I'll probably go to 78. I usually, there's like that top 5 I visit more often, but you know, and so I'm always coming around to a different 60s show. And because at this point in time, there were so many good quality 60s shows out there, almost every time I revisit it, I forget like, oh, that's right, they did this, or oh my gosh, that is chaotic, or wow, this solo is better than I thought. And so it's continuing to surprise me. So that's why it's here. And if the ZFT were going to release an entire box set of shows from a tour, like that 68, 69 with Lawa George and Buzz Gardner, that sort of last real big tour that they did, to hear every show from that, I think would probably be one of the greatest things ever. I would buy however big that box set would be. So anyways, yeah, that. So what did this band play? This band played a whole bunch of stuff, and there's no way I'm going to cover it. You definitely had like your certain songs that appeared in a lot of set lists. You had your King Kongs, your Pound for Browns on the Bus. You had Little House I Used to Live In. Those were common. Sleeping in a Jar. You had your eventually like your Prelude to the Afternoon of a Sexually Aroused Gas Mask, your Charles Ives, those types of sort of instrumental jams. You had the Duke. You had a lot of just random improvisation. In the Sky. Oh, in the sky. was one of those songs that popped up. He had all these just sort of random kind of like 50s covers. My Guitar Wants to Kill Your Mama, which was pretty rocking early on. The Orange County Lumber Truck and Let's Make the Water Turn Black and those We're Only in It for the Money songs. Plastic People pretty much is heard on stage one. Some ballet music, which eventually would find its way into Gregory Peccary. And I did re-listen to something. I think it's the Fullerton show from 69, but there is a show in 69 where they play some ballet music, and at the very end they play like the actual thing, and then there's like a little sort of kind of improv-y jammy part, and then I swear the end of it kind of sounds like the ending of Don't You Ever Watch That Thing from the 73 era, where after there would be like a drum solo or a solo, they do that dun 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 dun, dun and it kind of repeats this thing and kind of fades off. It sounds like that. Really, it's like definitely not the same sort of notes and the same exactual rhythm, but the idea is there. Like it's the same idea that Frank would employ in Don't You Ever Watch That Thing. Positive. My ears are not tricking me. Status Back Baby. More Trouble Every Day, like or The Trouble Coming Every Day, not the revamped version from 74. But you know, the heavy on the lyrics version with usually a nice jam or guitar solo at the end. Uncle Meat, always sounding amazing. Drum duets, Wedding Dress Song early on in Handsome Cowboy Boy. Guest spots from Wildman Fisher doing the absolutely pretty horrible I'm the Meanie. I mean, he's a meanie. I'm the meanie. Like, I think he like punches his pregnant girlfriend or pushes her down the stairs or something. It's a pretty horrible song. There's a lot of stuff. And again, I'm not going to be able to cover it because there's way too much stuff thrown in. Like looking at 69 set lists, it's just like, oh, they did that this one time and that this one time. And it's just insane. Yeah. So where can you hear this band? Like, I think you can get, I think the best sense of sort of the chaos of, especially when you get to like 69, I think Weasel's Rip My Flesh as an album does a really good job of capturing sort of like what these shows felt like at their best, which you would have Frank conducting the band through all kind of madness and different time signatures and the operatic singing from the bass player, and then you get a beautiful sort of pop number, either an original Mother's number or a cover or like a Stravinsky piece, and then you get more chaos, and then you get like a 20-minute King Kong where everybody gets to solo and jam. But Weasel's Rip My Flesh does a good job of showing that sort of chaos, beautiful song, chaos, beautiful melody, chaos, guitar solo, does a good job of showing that off. The two places where you can hear this band live, like sort of in its entirety, are Road Tapes #1, which is a 68 show, an excellent 68 show. I think that was number 15 on my 55 best out of the 55 released after Zappa Family after Frank passed away. Probably should be higher, but again, there's a lot of really good shows they have released. And then Ahead of Their Time, which Ahead of Their Time is not, I think, a very strong album. It has the first half of it, they did something called Progress. It was kind of like a skit that they did, which again, one time they go and they perform in London and they do this like play on stage, you know? And then the second half of that is your more traditional songs, King Kong, Pound for a Brown on the Bus, you know, Help I'm a Rock, Transylvania Boogie, Let's Make the Orange County Lumber Truck, that kind of stuff. And the performances on that are pretty, I'm not going to say uninspired, but they're like very Reader's Digest-y version. Like you get all the things you're supposed to get, but it just kind of feels short and a little like just we're hitting the main points and we're not getting all the juicy side details. It's like they took like a really steamy, racy novel and Reader's Digest condensed it. That's what Ahead of Their Time feels like. But it's still a great listen because these songs are great and this band is great. And it does contain one of the songs, Ahead of Their Time, that I think is one of the peak live Frank performances. I talked about this on 78. I think The Torture Never Stops from Winter 78 is a peak Frank song. Dupree's Paradise from 73 and 74, a peak Frank live song. I don't know why I'm putting my hand like this. There's a peak up here, I guess. But the Pound for a Brown on the Buses, the string quartets, as they were called originally from this era, I think might be the single best thing a live Frank band ever did, particularly this band's version of it. I was listening to Ahead of Their Time recently, just to remind myself how sadly uninspired some of that is. And that Pound for a Brown on the Bus, I think one of my favorite things of any band that plays this is this. So if you play this as a band on a Frank Zappa tour, it's definitely for me one of the highlights, because I love the way Frank arranges how any particular band plays that sort of main theme, that do that part, that intro theme, and then you get the melody that comes in, the da 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 da, right, and then you get that weird sort of middle breakdown part before you revisit the theme, and then you're off to solos. This one, Don Preston, it does a lot of the heavy lifting. I'm assuming it's Preston, but it's an organ, doing a lot of that melody and a lot of carrying in that rhythm. But then when you get to that weird breakdown thing, it's the horn players, and it just sounds like it sounds like a piece of classical music. It sounds like the soundtrack, like I should be watching Fantasia 2000 when they did that Fantasia reboot back in 2000. Like, it sounds like this could be one of the pieces of music in Fantasia 2000. And like I should see like little pigs in tutus dancing around. The do and the horns are just like dancing around and over and through each other. And it's one of the most beautiful pieces of music I think any Frank band has ever played. It's played a lot in the 60s. So it's one of the reasons why I absolutely love this. But there are so many moments like that, like the Octandre that Frank does. The cover of it's a Varese number. Ridiculous. Like that, the way he takes that guitar and just bends those guitar notes. It has a very evil Black Sabbath sort of leaning into what would be Filthy Habits type vibe. It's just absolutely amazing that a rock band was doing this stuff like every night. Yeah, man. So like so what else? I was talking about getting distracted. I was talking about where else you can hear this band. So you can hear like almost full concerts, or I think both of those are full concerts, on Road Tapes Venue 1, Ahead of Their Time. There's a variety of tracks on Stage 1, on Stage 4. The entire first disc of Stage 5 is from this era. Kind of a frustrating disc in a way, because it doesn't give you a full show. It just kind of gives you a lot of edits, which Frank's edits could sometimes be frustrating. You can hear, so there's a couple tracks on the Zappa movie original soundtrack. Weasels Rip My Flesh and Burnt Weenie Sandwich have some stuff on there that is live stuff from this band. Uncle Meat, Joe's Corsage, Joe's X-Massage, some of the earlier stuff from this era. The Mystery Disc has stuff. And then this band is essentially not playing live, but they are, for the most part, a lot of the band members that are responsible for most of my favorite Frank Zappa albums. So, yeah, I don't know what else to say about this band other than if you really want to know how great they are, you kind of have to go listen to them. Because, yeah. And where should you start to listen? That's a good question. So one of the first shows I got, and I know it's out there on YouTube, is it's a 69 Appleton, Wisconsin show. And I think it really I think there are better performances out there. It's still an incredibly inspired show. There are some shows that have some better solos. But I think just sort of the set list and vibe of this show captures this era really well. So it opens up with some ballet music, which is a piece of music that would eventually end up in Gregory Peck. I think this is the version that has that dun 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 ending on it. And then it has an Uncle Meat, which were amazing during this tour, during this era. Then they play something called Eye of Agamotto, which is a Don Preston song. Sounds like a keyboard heavy, almost like prog space rock type thing. Like a jazz type number, like a jazz space rock thing where you get like a main theme and then you get some like improv solo action, then return to the main theme. I think they did that 3 times. So I think that was pretty interesting that Frank's letting a Don Preston number get played. Then you get a My Guitar Wants to Kill Your Mama, just a great rock and roll number. Then it devolves into sort of Frank conducting the band and making noises, and then he teaches the audience the hand signals, and he does it in stereo, something he did common throughout this area, where he's like, when I do this, you guys do it, and he'd point to different parts. And even on like an audio tape, or some of these tapes from this era are Don Preston would record from atop of his keyboards, from my understanding. And so we have a lot of Don Preston sort of like stage tapes. But even with these like somewhat low quality tapes, you can hear the sound kind of move around your tape. It's pretty interesting. It must have been neat to be there. But then you get a Kung Fu, which is a different version, more of a some ballet music, Igor's Boogie type, arranged type piece, other different than the one we get in 73. Eric Dolphin Memorial Barbecue, which just descends into all kinds of great stuff, including a part where like different horn players are different, playing different like short little melodies from different songs in the middle. Hungry Freaks Daddy, a little house I used to live in that devolves into like an ABC, where I think Frank's playing ABC by himself on guitar, or maybe Lowell George is playing ABC. I think it's Frank. And then that goes into a Transylvania Boogie, Help I'm a Rock. There are other, this is the one where he plays Transylvania Boogie on the guitar, and then they go into Help in a Rock, and then they go back into Transylvania Boogie, and then you get a King Kong, Igor's Boogie, sort of as to close out the show. But just like jams, just all this different stuff in one show, and I think that's a perfect example of one of the best shows. Another really good show is Fullerton from Denver from May 68 is another really good show. That one opens up with like some improv that sort of devolves into Octandre, the Varese cover, and just that really biting Zappa guitar in that thing. That goes into a Plastic People, kind of like the one you hear on stage one, and that devolves into like sort of a jammy chaos at the end. You get a little house I used to live in, which has other quotes inside that. It just seemed like this band had such a depth of material that at any point in time they could drop like a Blue Danube or a Teddy Bear's Picnic or, one of Frank's own songs into any given jam or anything. It's just amazing. And then you get random like a Go Cry on Somebody Else's Shoulder thrown in there, or like a Status Back Baby, or, yeah. This tour is absolutely amazing. Again, there's a lot of shows on YouTube. Just Google Zappa 68 or Mother 68 Live, Mother 69 Live, and a bunch of shows will pop up. And most of them, if you click on like the information below, will give you the sound quality. Coaster Magic X2 uploaded a couple Fillmore shows, which don't have that great sound quality, but if you can make your way through the others, eventually find your way to those shows and listen to them because they're really good. But yeah, like, I cannot do this tour justice. All I know is if you like Uncle Meat, if you like Weasels Rip My Flesh, if you like that sort of chaotic element with then long horn solos and Frank conducting the band and then making noises and just elements of chaos and then R&B songs and all that, I'm just going to say these same things over and over again. This is just an amazing era. And I still don't think the definitive live show from this era has been released. Like maybe a Lowell George box set of that end of 68 into like halfway through 69, maybe a box set of that tour with like 2 shows and maybe like an extra disc of just like the best parts of other shows would be absolutely amazing. But yeah. So I just can't do this justice. I know it. So anyways, in your comments below, let me know what you think of this. Let me know what important things I missed, because I missed a lot. I know I did. But it's such an overwhelming period of music. And I'm not one of those who was like, the original Mothers is the best because this is number 2 and not number 1. But in a way, like what Frank was doing with the original Mothers was the best. It just felt like at any given show, anything could happen. More than in any other tour. And while there were other tours where sometimes you're like, wow, I can't believe that happened, this one, that was just kind of a theme of everything the original Mothers did. And someone recently, I've received many comments asking me to like, interested in like my rankings of the drummers and the bass players and the singers and all that stuff, and it is something I am going to do. And while on a technical level, this rhythm section, which is essentially kind of 3 people, Jimmy Carl Black on drums, the original bassist, and then either Billy Mundy or Art Tripp on percussion and other drums, is really kind of 3 people. Some of my favorite music of all time is the Jimmy Carl Black on drums. Like, I can't deny that while his drumming is definitely almost like I don't even know how to describe it. It's almost like motoric a lot of the times. It has a Con-esque sort of krautrock feel, it seems at times, but Frank's own twisted West Coast Freaks version of that. It's just some of my favorite stuff. And yeah, it's really repetitive and dun dun, 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 just kind of driving the same thing into the ground, but it produces some of my all-time favorite Mother's music. So how can I not rank that high? Though it seems weird, but I can't deny its greatness, can I? I don't know. That's a whole other conversation for a whole other video. But anyways, yeah, that's it for now. I know I missed a lot. I'm going to say that a lot. This tour is fantastic. It's just, it's crazy. It's chaos. I don't even know how to approach it. This video hopefully is as chaotic as I should just like scream for like a minute. And that would make this more 60s, but I'm not. I'm going to end this now. Thank you for watching. We all know what number one is, right? A lot more, that's another video. I'm going to have a hard time like covering all the really good stuff. But anyways, thanks for watching. Subscribe, comment below, all that stuff. Peace, y'all, and yeah.